Okay, welcome back. We're going to do something a little different today. We're myth busting the holiday season because for all the talk about peace, joy, and togetherness, the holidays can also bring, credit card statements, uncomfortable conversations, and the annual performance review of Santa's balance sheet. Now, this isn't about being the Grinch of personal finance. In fact, the great myth is that these stresses are inevitable. They're not. They're predictable, which means we can plan for them. And today I'm joined by someone who thinks deeply about the stories we tell ourselves around money and how those stories shape our behavior. So Samantha Ouimet, head of marketing and communications, senior vice president with Raymond James. She sent me a note recently outlining 3 common holiday myths that we all fall for, including professionals just like us. And when I read through them, my first thought was, yeah, guilty, right? So we're going to be talking about why holiday spending doesn't have to lead to hardship, why conversations about money don't have to ruin Christmas dinner, and why gifts are not a proxy for love, no matter what your inner 10-year-old says. And this is going to be a conversation about taking back control, rewriting old narratives, and walking into January empowered instead of playing financial catch-up. So let's get into it. Samantha, welcome. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy day.
Thank you for having me. It's an important topic, and just thinking about it is going to be a good reminder for myself as well. So
Yeah.
hopefully there's some points here that we can help people out with.
Fantastic. Yeah. So getting into that idea that financial hardship is inevitable around the holidays, what drives this thinking, you think, from the masses, I guess?
So if you think about the holidays, think about how and it's just funny because the way you started, we all assume we're going to be in it over the holidays. We assume that we're going to be going all the places, visiting all the family. And we're lucky to have these problems to have family to visit. But you think about, it's not just the gift giving, it's the traveling, it's the entertaining, and it is the gifts and what comes with that. And I think we go into the holiday mindset a lot of times just in our society, we see it depicted as a stressful time. It's very commercialized, and so we go into it with the premeditated idea that we're going to be spending money because we inevitably are, and that there are a lot of special moments that we don't want to miss out on. And because it's so hectic, and there's so many sales, you're just gonna be out there and you're gonna get by.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we close our eyes and we get to the other side of it, and then we deal with it. And so to your point, there's so many studies around this, like it's incredible. And I'm one of them. 94% of Canadians they expect the holidays to cause some financial stress. And the stress isn't just the spending, it's the conversations you may be having with your partner, with your kids, right? So there's a lot of layers to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of pushback from children, right? They want more and more and more, despite they probably already have great stuff. But those arguments about money can create unbelievable amount of stress, interpersonal issues, and they can linger for a long time afterwards. A lot of us, I think, just to avoid the conflict, you just put it on the Visa or the MasterCard and go, this is a future me problem, and I'll figure it out later, and just kind of be maybe passive aggressive about it and just kind of, well, I don't want to have this uncomfortable conversation, but we really shouldn't be spending this money. But to keep the peace, you kind of move on.
Well, even think about this year, so over half of Canadians actually do rely on their credit card, but even more this year, I saw a study that said we've seen an almost doubling of people relying on buy now, pay later deals this year. And
Interesting.
again, so if you think about where does that come in handy, you think about, again, entertaining, family coming to stay, you're now buying that TV, you're buying that extra bedding, that setting up that guest room. It all gets loaded into the holidays. And if you think about who's making the financial decisions in the family, who's got the time to go shopping, and some of the inevitable stressful conversations that can create in household dynamics, not just with kids, but with your spouse.
This is pretty early in the Christmas season. Hopefully, I mean, we're having our corporate Christmas party tomorrow night, and it feels like the kickoff of the Christmas season. It'll just be cocktail party after cocktail party, which is, again, first world problems. Is a wonderful, wonderful issue to have. But hopefully we can catch people early enough in the season to have this conversation. We can get this, hopefully we get this show out in the next few days. But what does that conversation look like around having a shared vision or plan, in particular around spouses? How do you communicate that in the household, do you think, to the kids to set some expectations so that if they expect, that they're going to get both the Xbox and the PS5, we got to temper this down a little bit?
All right. It's hard for parents because we want to do the best for our kids, right? So I think, and this is where we can bust the myth around financial hardship is inevitable. And this isn't complicated stuff. It's having a plan. And so great if you have a financial plan, because you can then look at how holiday spending fits into that. And if you don't, that's okay. You can always have one later, but then you can have a holiday spending plan. And I honestly think agreeing to an amount, and if it's going through, okay, who are we buying for this year? Or if we're entertaining, just having the conversation is going to allow you to be less reactionary when you're out in the hustle and bustle of the season. And also, especially if you have a financial plan, and you could apply this outside of the holidays, think of vacation planning, all these things. If you have a financial plan, it gives you a shared vision to have safe conversations about what makes sense. So it's not subjective. It's not related to your preferences and what you want to do this year. And it is related to a shared financial goal in the family. And where does holiday giving and spending fit into that? So it just unloads it from being a me-you conversation, and it's a conversation about us. And if we do want to go crazy and we want to host everybody with, and we want to buy all the things, and we want to, then after that, then that's a shared decision. And then you understand where that fits in your plan. So, so I think if you have the opportunity to do it now, I know the sales have started, but my advice would be, if you have a financial plan, like, take a look at it now. If you don't, make one for the seasons and then think about having a financial plan later. It'll make next year easier. But really importantly, before you go to the mall, if you just do one thing, the old adage about don't go to the grocery store hungry, because it's the same thing with holiday shopping. Don't go to the mall without a list. So if you even have a list of what you plan to buy, and try to stick to it so that you are intentional and not reactionary in those desperate moments where you can't find the thing, because that extra $100 on this person, on not quite the right thing or whatever, it starts to add up really quickly. I know from experience. And also this goes to the same with entertaining, right? So when you're having people over, you feel like you want to do right by your guests, but it's the same when you're planning what how you're doing your holiday entertaining. So just a plan, a list, and you can decompress that.
I love that. Literally making a list and checking it twice.
Literally making a list.
Humans are very impulsive beings, so it makes a lot of sense that if you don't go to the store, or at least just sit in front of your computer on Amazon or whatever it is, if you don't have a list that you're literally checking off, you're going to get waylaid into some corner of the internet or the department store and go, I could get this for Susie or Timmy. And then all of a sudden it imbalances the gift piles between kids. We've all seen this at the big family brunch or something where all the nieces and nephews are out, and there is this kind of stare off going on between the kids where they see the imbalance. And so we're trying to psychologically not allow that to happen, because you don't want to have the fights ensue. So keep that list and check it twice. Make sure that you know exactly what you're spending, right?
And I love that you mentioned the different, in family when they're together. And it's a good segue into another myth, right, around the holidays, which is you have power dynamics in families, regardless of whether there's the brother that earns more, there's the aunt that did maybe inherited something, and there's maybe some family members that are on there's different power dynamics in families. So one of the myths that I think also is unfortunate around the holidays is that you can't use that opportunity to have important family conversations about when you're together, about your wishes in life. And I think, the myth is people feel conversations about money are going to disrupt that holiday spirit. It's insensitive to bring it up. But a real holiday buzzkill is when you have family members that are potentially burdened with care, with extended caregiving, when you have families that are having difficult conversations about inheritances and so on. So holidays are actually a great time when people are together to have conversations like that.
It's really important from an estate planning perspective, right? Where we talk to some of our elderly clients around building their will, having all their finances ready to go, but then they never have a conversation with any of their heirs or beneficiaries about what their plan is. Right. And it's really hard to ask questions of someone who's no longer with us. And so if you put your plan out there and kind of break down that taboo of having these financial conversations wide out in the open, you can make people a lot more comfortable with the financial realities of their life. And maybe people go, you get more input from other family members who go, you know what, hey, grandma, I don't know if I love that plan. I'm going to inherit more than my brother or more than my sister. And you
Right.
know what, my little sister's doing more work with you to help you in your elderly years because I don't live here. I only see you at Christmas. Maybe we could adjust this to be a little bit more equal, whatever that conversation is. But it at least allows people to have input and questions answered rather than just wonder for the rest of their life, why this never got brought up, right?
Well, if you think and again, bringing up all the different members of the family, they're all stakeholders. So, and I get it. It's hard. When's the right time, right? You're all to be, because you're finally all together. The last thing you want to do is have these conversations. But trust me, you are all, especially this, that sandwich generation we talk about, we are all stakeholders in this conversation. And so with people living so much longer, yeah, with chronic diseases, you do get into these dynamics with different members of the family that become caregivers. And, it is surprising that more than half of Canadians actually don't even have a will, let alone a complete estate plan. So if you're sitting with your parents and they're getting older, the risk of dementia starts to increase. And then then it's too late to have the conversation. So when it could have been had in a way that feels like part of family planning, and it feels like a conversation about life and a conversation about the well-being of everybody. And that's what the holidays is all about. It's about connectedness and people being together. So it is a myth that it is a bad time of year. It is actually the perfect time of year. There's just, I think, another way to potentially go about it if you haven't had the conversations already.
I like that you brought up the mental incapacitation issue because this is a quiet epidemic going on where if you haven't had these conversations before mom or dad or grandma and grandpa have an issue, then what? Because, there's only roughly 40 million of us here in this country, and approximately 800,000 of our family members and neighbors are dealing with some level of dementia or Alzheimer's. That's a lot of us. And if you don't catch this early or before, how do you do any planning? And now you're just going through some really tough years knowing the planning can't get done. And it
Right.
becomes an even bigger financial stress in the background. And that's a really scary thing if you haven't done it in advance. So using every opportunity you can. I was thinking about this recently because my little sister lives in the States and we go back and forth and we talk and FaceTime and all this stuff. But she brought up recently to me that living so far away, you don't get the access to family members. And so she often thinks about how many more times she's going to interact with certain family members and really trying to concentrate her efforts on when she's present, that she's just totally all in. Why wouldn't there be a money conversation involved in that visit if you think you're only going to have a dozen or 20 more visits with this person all time? It's extremely important.
So, and I think a way to make it, because again, but conversely, you could say, why would I have a money conversation? I just want to have
Yeah.
fun, right? I
Yeah,
don't.
right. Get this off of
So,
the
but
plate.
I get, but I think that the way to sort of bust through this one is it's really not actually a conversation like about money. It's a conversation about everyone's well-being, right? And it's a conversation about the well-being of your family, caregivers. If there's no like, there's like that can build a lot of resentment amongst siblings and amongst cousins and aunts and uncles. There's financial hardships, real ones, associated with being a caregiver, from terms of like loss of income, the expenses you put out, and so not having those conversations, like it creates a different type of hardship. But this is about the well-being of your family. And so I think to make it more approachable, I think that's the angle, right? You use open-ended questions, you have conversations about, Aunt Susie, or, mom and dad, what are the things that you're looking forward to doing as you continue to age, right? You don't have to say, what do you have a will? You can start that conversation, and you can let, the myth, that plays into this is that we're together. So we have to have open and close the conversation in this period of time. It doesn't, again, it's like planning. It can be a conversation because it's about well-being in life, not just about dollars and cents. It can happen over a period of time. So the win is even just planting the seed, starting the conversation, and just even initiating that, it could be a potential win for you and your family and for generations, right? So it can be anything from power of attorney, but also to do you about wills and about estate planning, giving, charitable giving. That matters to a lot of people. So, and a lot of families. Those conversations can come at the start if you want to, if that's where you are, but or it can come down the line because it's a conversation about life and well-being.
I think about the charitable giving piece a lot because I've seen and worked with clients that have gone through horror stories in settling an estate where the charity is the last place, the last organization to get a check written to it, right? And so if you haven't discussed your will with your heirs and it's not part of a family legacy, often the executors, if they're like, the surviving kids, will look at this and go, okay, mom and dad's estate's $1 million and they've left $100,000 to XYZ charity. We're really at a stage in life where we could use that money, and they'll challenge the will, and it blows up the legacy that mom or dad wanted to leave because it just wasn't part of a conversation. And charities know this, right? They don't take a lot of stock in being named in people's wills unless there's like an insurance product involved. And so if having that conversation can bring people together in why the parents wanted to have this legacy gift to their
Right.
community, and it could be a very feel good story. It might make people realize that mom or dad has a hobby or a volunteer activity that we didn't even know about, and it can bring people closer rather than push them away. But people often are afraid of that conversation because they think it'll push the people away. It probably does the opposite, right?
And actually, and that's another great, like, because even just giving and hobbies, I think that can be an open-ended way to start a conversation about, oh, as you age and get bringing family to be involved in the charity, there's a lot of different ways that you can come in so that can be a, and listen, I know it's hard, but it doesn't have to be difficult. The only time I would say my only watch out and I don't have the answer to this, but one thing, and it's particularly important, we have so many changing family dynamics. And I think it's particular, we have a lot of the gray divorce is a real phenomenon now. We've seen, like it's almost 40% of divorces in Canada now are people that are over 50.
Wow.
And so if you think about what that means, so if your mom or dad has repartnered, if both of them have, then you start to get into questions about the next layer of what happens when you've got now four, potential beneficiaries involved. Who's remarried and she passes away first. Does her new partner, then get then be the recipient, and then it's their kids, and what happens to the family, right? And so these are tricky things, and they're increasing, and that is why these conversations are even more important, because the impact can extend quite far into the family. And then, when you do lose a loved one, it can be years of fraught conversation or frustration. If depending on their commitments, if they had still dependents from their previous marriage, whether it's an adult child with lifelong financial requirements, perhaps a spouse that had been supported, those things all become challenging, and it puts kids, again, the stakeholders that are left behind, in a really tough situation.
Yeah, and you factor in the remarrying. It does happen a lot in British Columbia. We there's almost like memes about it. But one of the things that comes up a lot is the age gap difference between new spouses. And now if you've got a situation where one spouse is very statistically likely to die much sooner than another one, and now the kids are looking to that step parent to try and make sure that they're still in good stead for years and years at a time so they
Right.
don't get excluded from that. There's ways to plan for this, but again, a lot of people are afraid to have this conversation, and it's so important because if you don't, you're going to create more problems. It's the classic don't procrastinate the important thing, because it creates a bigger stress in the background.
Right.
I think I've seen actually Jeff Bezos talk about this, where stress is not real. It's just you procrastinating decisions that you have to make. And the faster you make the decision, the less stress you'll have. But it's so true in this exact thing, where if it's this comet trail of stress behind you, just have the conversation this holiday season. At least start it, like you say.
Start it. You do not have to open and close it. Don't have it. If you come in, it's like any conversation. You can come in with an agenda and try to pluck away at it because this is it. I think a win is just starting it and not to be afraid. And again, it's all about being planning and planning, but it's also making it a conversation about what matters. And that's part of the holiday season, right? So that you can't have it. It doesn't have to be a buzzkill. It can be actually a really important part of it, especially to your point. You have a sister who lives far away. If people are together, it can be a really meaningful and an important way to spend time.
You bet.
While all the gifts and everything else and whatever, if you're fortunate enough to have, is are all maybe in a quieter time.
Well, that brings us to the third myth that you described, gifts being a measure of love. And this made me immediately think of a book I was gifted years ago called Scroogenomics, where the economics of gift giving are ridiculous and we should all just give each other cash or at least gift cards to our favorite stores. But there's a lot of people love to try and find that perfect thing for other people, even if the other person doesn't prescribe the same amount of economic value to it. And the theory behind Scroogenomics is if I give you $100 in cash, it can just go spend $100 on whatever you want. But if I go buy you a sweater that costs $100, you might only value that at $60. And now there's a discrepancy in the economics of it. In the back of your mind, you don't think it was as good as a gift as just receiving $100.
Right.
It's fascinating how the psychological effects of gift giving can impact stresses and relationships. And this is everything from spouses to children to friends. So talk about the changing gift giving traditions and spending thresholds and how you can avoid upsetting family.
This is a hard one, and it's one I struggle with. And, when I was telling my husband today the conversation we're having, he said, "Well, I look forward to hearing what you say." Because it's really hard. Personal stories, like we're at the stage now, my son is 20, my niece and nephew, they're all in university. Like it doesn't, to buy them anything, these aren't small, and anything of meaning is very expensive and they don't need it, right? But they need different things now in life. But it's really, I think this conversation has a big impact depending on the generation of the gift giver and the gift receiver, and
Mhm.
of course the traditions that you have. And so if you've got grandma and grandpa who are used to coming with piles of stuff, right? They want to spoil the grandkids, but now they're retired and their income is fixed. How do they readjust expectations there, right? With their grandkids. I think the hard one too is for, and we won't talk about spouses, because if you're that spouse who's in the store on the 23rd of December, I don't have advice for you. You didn't have a list.
Yeah.
But they think about, I think the hard one too is now this year we know that people are planning to spend, this year in particular, people are revising their spending plans for the holidays. If you have little kids who are used to, whether it's Santa or, however they receive and celebrate, you don't want them to feel like they're disappointed and that they're getting something less. But the ability, it is a myth that is and I think we all know that intuitively, that the gift is the measure of love. And so the only way to get at that is I think it's very dependent on who you're dealing with, right? So we can tackle some of them, but at the end of the day, it all starts with what's meaningful to this age and stage of who you're dealing with, and then we can go from there. But it's hard because joy is in gift giving as well. And so I think that's what, it's a myth, and we can talk about it now, but maybe with little kids it's the hardest one. We could start with that one.
I find it so difficult because I prefer to try and buy experiences, but experiences don't line up perfectly with Christmas. So, the big thing was it last year? Yeah, of course, the Taylor Swift Eras Tour was sweeping across North America. And I
Yeah.
know a lot of parents that said, you know what, I'm going to get our little girl tickets for this concert. But it wasn't for months later. That disconnect, trying to explain to a 10-year-old that your Christmas present is like 4 months from now
Right.
because it's going to cost so much, is a hard thing to do as well. And then it has invariably just imbalances. So how do you balance it out amongst other kids? That conversation can be a challenge.
It can. And it can be whether you're used to giving many smaller gifts or whether you're used to, whatever tradition it is that you feel you need to change. It's hard. And I think, with if we take the kid example, I think financial literacy with your kids is really important, and finding a way to have that conversation, not to spoil the holidays, but talking about what the value of things are so they understand, I think is important leading up to and continuing that through, not necessarily on Christmas morning or wherever you're celebrating, but I think helping children understand what things cost is important, not in a scary way, but also most importantly, remembering that, to your point, experiences matter. And study after study shows that what kids really remember is the time you spent. And I have countless examples of my son's, it seems trite, but it's true that his biggest memories are the movie we went to see, which is in itself a big expense. It is the time we took the games tournament that we had, right? So if you are mindful about what's going to be meaningful to your child and you are willing to spend the time with it and give them your time and attention along with it, you can make all these gifts really memorable. I know how hard it is, but I think that is so you're not really changing the expectation, you're changing the experience of giving and receiving and adapting it to the environment that you're in right now. And if you think about older kids and grandparents and family members, at what point do you say, okay, we're not buying the kids, let's have the conversation with your sister or your parents and say they don't need anything, but you know what they would benefit from is they're saving for university. If they don't have a TFSA yet, I haven't opened. If you have older kids, open it, and every little, you would know better than anyone, small contributions matter to that. So again, what's going to be meaningful to the age and stage, and regardless of what it is, it's your time and attention.
I'm totally with you there. It also can actually spark this conversation around money within the family. So as you do get into the preteen or teen years, often these kids don't want just a bunch of trinkety little things or clothes or whatever. They might want one big thing, whether that's a gaming console or an e-bike or a big experience to somewhere. And you can bring the family together and say, listen, how much were you guys planning on spending on the kids this Christmas? Why don't we all pool it together and get one gift? We can present it as a family, and it brings us all together and having a discussion about how we did this together for, little Timmy or whatever. And that could spark this conversation around how's everyone's financial house doing? Can you chip in $50 for this, or are you only a $25 thing
Right.
this year?
Right.
And it might break the ice a little bit. And then the kid gets the big e-bike that they've been asking for all year. If you can't tell, this is what I've been badgered about all year long, is a
But think
very expensive e-bike.
Right, but again, it comes, if we think back to the start of the conversation, power dynamics in families. If you've got one group that's got more resources than the other, it's almost like, can you still afford to spend the holidays with members of your family? So you'd be surprised how many people would be grateful for that conversation. And there's no shame in it because it's responsible. And frankly, the outcomes are typically, again, like that memorable, time we, with a Secret Santa where someone got grandma that silly gift, or that you can create memories through the time and the attention. And I think, and again, I'll say it again, my myths around money and experiences around the holidays are grounded in when I was a kid. And I remember boom times and I remember bust times with my mom and dad. And they weren't, but there was no bust times. I just know that there were times when it was extravagant and times where it was measured. But
hmm
I don't remember the gifts. I just remember, in hindsight, I remember the time I spent with them. But I know that created my own stories about money. So I really, around the holidays. So I need to shape those for my own self, and we all need to do that for ourselves around this time of year. Any little bit of planning and intention is going to help. And that really is planning all year, having a financial plan and being able to make these decisions in the context of the financial plan is the most basic thing, I think, for anybody, because it does, like I said earlier, it allows you to see these decisions in the context of a bigger vision. So it doesn't feel like you're giving something up. It feels like you're on a path somewhere. But in the short term, if you just have some intentions around your spending and have a few conversations, you could probably, at a minimum, stick to your budget versus blow through something. And one of the most, there are people, like, I mean, there was a poll last year, and it, especially this has really impacted millennials and Gen Zs. Like, these are a generation that are using credit cards to buy holiday gifts. And in November this year, there's a poll, over 30% of them were still paying off their holidays from last year. And so I don't
Wow.
think any of us want that for our younger generation, so that they feel like they have to be going into debt to do the holidays with their family.
No kidding. I mean, if there's a theme running through all three myths today in our conversation, it's that the holidays don't necessarily create financial stress, but our lack of clarity does. And when you have a plan, when you communicate, when you adjust expectations with the people you love, everything just can get lighter, right?
Yes.
And like you mentioned as well, we all carry money stories from our childhood. Some serve us, others follow us around like old software, and then we forget to update it. The holidays have this funny way of activating those scripts, right? But they also give us a chance to rewrite them. And whether reviewing your financial plan or having the first estate planning conversation or gently renegotiating what gift giving means this year, those small intentional steps now can set you up to start the new year from a place of strength, right?
What a great, yeah. Who wouldn't rather start the year off feeling like all you have to do is maybe get back to some salads versus have to look at making sacrifices and then carry a credit card debt all year. It's just it's for a moment that's passed. So I think that's great advice. Just the intention.
Well, we'd probably be remiss if we didn't say, if this episode has sparked something for you listening, talk to your advisor, talk to your spouse, talk to your family. And if you don't already have a plan, now is a great time to build one. Future you will appreciate that decision far more than anything wrapped in a bow. So thank you so much, Sam, for sharing this today. I think this is a great, timely discussion that we have for our clients and anybody looking at having this discussion with their family.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's a great topic and great reminder even for me as I go into the season.
Yeah, best of luck with that shopping list.
Yeah, thanks. You too.
All right, thanks so much for listening or watching today. Please find us at helmfinancial.ca for ways to connect with my team. Information in this podcast is from sources believed to be reliable. However, we cannot represent that this is accurate or complete. It is provided as a general source of information and should not be considered personal investment advice or a solicitation to buy or sell securities. Raymond James advisors are not tax advisors, and we recommend that clients seek independent advice from a professional advisor on tax-related matters. The views are those of the author, Jon Helm, and not necessarily those of Raymond James Limited. Any investor should consult with their investment advisor to ensure that it is suitable for the investor's circumstances and risk tolerance before making any investment decisions. Securities-related products and services are offered through Raymond James Limited, a member of the Canadian Investor Protection Fund. Insurance products and services are offered through Raymond James Financial Planning Limited, which is not a member of the Canadian Investor Protection Fund. Raymond James USA Limited advisors may only conduct business with residents of the states and/or jurisdictions in which they are properly registered, and Raymond James USA Limited is a member of FINRA SIPC.